Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to begin by giving all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rucha, Chodash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostle of the millstone, and then our respected brothers that they're pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, I just wanted to do a quick lesson on this article, which is entitled Arab and Muslim states condemn Israel's West Bank annexation bills. Okay. The video that I did before doing this video was specifically addressing how Amalek had made a decision to go into Gaza, right, and set up their military and in a sense kick out the government of the government over there and set up their own government and rule it. And they have their people also spewing in there and taking homes and lands for themselves and so on and so forth. Now, before even making that video, I had made a previous video to that video explaining how the Arab and the Muslim states warned that if Israel do what we have read them doing here, that all hell was going to break loose. Okay? And so I'm just going to read the article, and then we're going to get into prophecy that specifically, talks about this event here in the book of 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter. And Lord willing, this be edifying. So it says, Arab and Muslim states condemn Israel's West Bank annexation bills. Countries reaffirmed that Israel has no sovereignty over occupied Palestinian territory. They welcomed the ICJ advisory opinion, which said Israel was obliged to ease the passage of aid into Gaza. That's another thing they're not doing, right? As a matter of fact, there are countless articles that talks about them killing, Palestinians when they go in to receive aid. It says Saudi Arabia and several other Arab and Muslim countries condemned on Thursday a pair of Israeli bills calling for the annexation of the occupied West Bank. As of this moment, America is not down with that annexation, but they only say it in words, right? But we know the inward thoughts of this devil. When he says one thing, he means another, right? That's why the scripture talks about him being like a serpent, right? And how so his words are like poison, and how he has horns like a lamb, but he speaks as a dragon, right? That's the duplicitous nature of this devil, these heathen, especially these heathens, especially Edom, especially America. So they may not be, you've been here JD fans condemning the annexation, but they ain't gonna do nothing about it. So if at the end of the day they don't help them annex that territory and add it onto Israel. So it says the 15 countries, including Palestine, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, and Turkey, as well as the Arab League and Organization of Islamic Cooperation, said they condemn in the strongest terms and the bills, which they call a blatant violation of international law, right? A bill applying Israeli law to the West Bank, a move tantamount to annexation of a territory the Palestinians seek for a part of a future independent state, won preliminary approval from Israeli lawmakers on Wednesday. Okay, so they passed a law even though the country that backs them up ain't even with them at the moment, right, which is America. So that is how you know who really, is lobbying, who are the lobbyists in the American government. When we talk about Amalek and we talk about how they shall draw out the nations, this is the recklessness that we speak of. And these reckless decisions would lead to the death of billions, all right? This is in a joint statement, so it says that they have a bill. So Amalek has already brought up a bill, and it has won preliminary approval from Israeli lawmakers on Wednesday. In a joint statement reportedly by the Saudi press agency, the countries reaffirmed that Israel has no sovereignty over occupied Palestinian territory. They also welcomed the International Court of Justice advisory opinion, which said Israel was obliged to ease the passage of aid into Gaza and provide Palestinians with the basic needs to survive. All right, let me see. Huh. And it says Israel was obliged to ease the passage of aid and provide Palestinians with basic needs to survive. They ain't gonna do that shit, okay? They're not gonna do it. That's like throwing an antelope into a lion's den and then saying, I fully expect the lion to take care of the antelope and protect it. It says Israel is under the obligation to agree to and facilitate relief schemes provided by the United Nations and its entity, including the UNRWA. Israel has not allowed the UNRWA to bring in its supplies since March, but the agency continues to operate in Gaza, running health centers, mobile medical teams, and sanitation services and school classes for children. It says it has 6,000 trucks of supplies waiting to get in. All right. The countries warned against Israel's unilateral actions and illegal policies and urged global powers to stop its unlawful measures in occupied Palestinian territory. They warned against the continuation of Israel's unilateral and illegal policies and practices and called on the international community to shoulder its legal and moral responsibilities and to compel Israel to cease its dangerous escalation and unlawful measures in occupying Palestinian territory. They keep calling for these measures, but nothing's going to happen because just like it didn't happen when just like sanctions were in place on them, just like troops didn't invade their land, just like the United Nations didn't step in when they were slaughtering, murdering, and withholding essential aids to civilians. The same way are they not going to do shit when Israel rose in and taken. But what does the scripture say, right? The book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 15. Yep, chapter 15. Verse 29, starting from verse 28, it says, Behold, an horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and a multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble. All right? So the dragons of Arabia represents what we just read here, the Muslim states, the Arab and Muslim states. All right? These are the dragons of Arabia. They shall come out with many chariots, meaning they'll come out to fight, right? Because that's what happens when you bring many chariots. Your intention is to fight a battle. And a multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble. So the Lord is gonna put a spirit in them, just like it even talks about in the book of Ezekiel, the 30th chapter, how the Lord was gonna put His spirit in Gog and Magog, and He was gonna put hooks in their jaws, and evil thoughts shall come to their mind. The same thing here in the book in 2nd Ezra, the 29th verse, chapter 15. It says also the Carmanians, so all they which hear them may fear and tremble. It says also the Carmanians, which are the Persians, which are the Iranians, right? Raging in wrath, predominantly the Iranians, right? Because you have those same people kind of spread around. It says also the Carmanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. And this Assyria is talking about America. You can read about the same kind of symbolism in the book of Nahum, right? The whole book of Nahum talks about the Assyrians. And so it says what? The dragons of Arabia with the Persians, right? The Iranians, you got the Elamites, the Indians, the Bangladesh, the Pakistani, and all these people, right? You got them, but Iran being like the number one, if they're gonna be the one that kind of heads off that spearhead the dragons of Arabia. So they, with Iran, they will go out in wrath as wild boars of the wood, and they will come out with great power, and they will join battle against, right, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. In other words, they shall shoot missiles onto Babylon. Now, how are they ever going to get this powerful? They get this powerful by what? By joining forces with Russia, Gog and Magog, which is spoken about in the book of Second Ezekiel, the 30th chapter, and the book of Revelations, the 20th chapter, right? That's the battle of Armageddon. And then shall the dragon, the Islamic states, they will have the upper hand, remembering their nature, right? And what is the nature of what? Of Ishmael, because that's who they are. Wild man. Let's put wild man. The book of Genesis, chapter 16, verse 11, it says, "And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord Yahweh has heard thine affliction. And he will be a wild man." Ishmael will be a wild man. "His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him." That's why you see them getting constantly bombed day in and day out. That's why you see these attacks that they do, right? These laws that they follow, the decapitation. I mean, all the gruesome shit, the dancing boys, they are wild people, okay? They claim to be people of the Lord, but they really ain't. They are wild men, and that's why the hand of every man is against them. No one sympathizes with them, at least until now, right? But we in the end, and the only reason that they're getting support now is to what? Is because in the last days, everybody's going to be against Babylon. And so now Babylon's enemies are not other people's enemies anymore. Now the Lord is separating Babylon from the rest of the world. So it says, "And every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." That's why you have that whole Middle East. You have all these countries close together, the Islamic states, the Arab countries, all right next to each other, right? There isn't an Islamic state across the Atlantic Ocean. There isn't one in Europe. It's all there in what? They're all dwelling together over there in the Middle East. This is all prophetic. So when the scripture says that they shall remember their nature, he will be a wild man, all right? And everything that we know them to be doing, right? These terrorist attacks, they're gonna take it to 100, 100 times the level we know them to be doing. Right, so it says, remembering their nature, and if they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power to persecute them, right? So that them being Assyria, then these shall be troubled, bled, and kept silence through their power, and shall flee, right? And from the land of the Assyrians shall the enemy besiege them, and consume some of them, and in their host shall be fear and dread and strife among their kings, right? So this talks about how they're gonna get an upper hand against Babylon, and how the Babylons, how the fear, right, is gonna be running through Babylon, because the whole world is against them. That's why the scripture says that the number of them is as the sands of the sea. Okay, it says, "Behold, clouds of the east and from the north unto the south, and they are very horrible to look upon, full of wrath and storm," right? So that's that battle. It says, "They shall smite one upon another, and they shall smite down a great multitude of stars upon the earth," right? These are the missiles, right? So, the smoke and all these things, the missiles hitting and all, that's the battle being described here from 34th, 35th, right? Even 36. It says what? The multitude of stars upon the earth. So these are missiles. It's not actual stars, even their own star. And showing you, because you can't own a star, right? But their own star, meaning their own missiles. "And blood shall be from the sword unto the belly." In other words, the blood that shall be spilled as a result of the sword will be, will kind of flood to the belly. In other words, there's going to be a lot of people dying. And the dung of men onto the camel's heel. And this is like a camel's knees, I believe. Yeah, the camel's knees. So the men's bodies are going to pile up all the way up into a camel's knee. Camel's knee is roughly to the what? To the length of what? A man's belly to his feet. Right? And there shall be great fearfulness and trembling upon the earth, and they that see the wrath shall be afraid, and trembling shall come upon them. And then shall there come great storms from the south and from the north, and from other parts of the west. And strong winds shall arise from the east, and shall open it. And the clouds which he raised up in wrath, and the stars stirred, to cause fear towards the east and west wind, shall be destroyed. Right? It says, the great and mighty clouds shall be puffed up full of wrath, and the stars, that they may take all the earth, that they may make all the earth afraid, and them that dwell therein, and they shall pour out every high and eminent place a horrible star. Right? And it goes into it. So this is all describing the battle scene, right, with the missiles and all these things. And it says what? And they shall go steadfastly unto Babylon, and make her afraid. They shall come unto her and beseech her. Same thing it talked about in Assyria is the same difference. Okay, so it shall beseech her. The star and all the wrath shall they pour out upon her, the missiles, and shall the dust and the smoke go up into the heaven, and all they that be about her shall bewail her. Right? The book of Revelation talks about the merchant standing far off, crying as to how the city that brought them much riches was brought to an end. But yeah, so the scripture says that when it comes to the destruction of Babylon, or the destruction of Edom, Amalek will be the ones who draw out that battle. They will draw out the multitude. So, with that being said, I'm going to end right there, giving all praise and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rucha Kodash, and Shalom Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Brakatham to all your Akims and Akwifs that are listening in truth and sincerity. May the blessing of blessing be upon us. Until next time, Shalom.